Hi folks, this is Dr. Rob Cywes. I am the Carb Addiction Doc, and today we're going to discuss and explore and get some thoughts on a phenomenon that occurs in all mammals when they wake up. All mammals, when they wake up, experience something called the dawn effect. What is the dawn effect? Well, the dawn effect, in essence, is a rise in your blood sugar as soon as you wake up. And there are certain hormones that get released, and we're going to discuss these because they may not be just what you think, but there are certain hormones that get released when you wake up. When it's like putting your car into first gear. It's been idling the whole night, and now you put it into first gear and you step on the accelerator. The dawn effect is where the liver predominantly releases a rapid bolus of sugar from stored glycogen, and then in a slight delayed fashion from gluconeogenesis, from the conversion of protein, a little bit of fat into sugar to bump your blood sugar up, to give you, just like your car when you step on the gas on the gas pedal, to give you that burst of energy to wake up in the morning for brain restoration, brain function. Remember, you're going from being flat while you're asleep, REM sleep, to suddenly waking up, and there's a requirement for a sudden bolus of energy. And so that's what the dawn effect is. It's a physiologic effect to get going. Now, what's interesting is the dawn effect is measurable anytime you sleep. Because when you sleep, when you have a nap that's probably longer than about 15 to 20 minutes, all the hormonal systems in your body just slightly go quiet under normal conditions. And then as soon as you wake up, you get that bump. So if you have a little nap in the middle of the afternoon, boom, it happens. A lot of our Spanish colleagues and Spanish friends have siesta time. Certainly, I love that in Spain, and certainly in South America. And that siesta, you have a dawn effect at the end of that as well. So we'll get back to that in a second. But anytime you sleep, there's a dawn effect. It's most noticeable after a long sleep in the morning. And it is a normal part of the body. And what the dawn effect also does is it should, as the blood sugar goes up, in a little bit of, under normal conditions, it should have a little trigger of insulin. And insulin then shoves that sugar into the cell. So the predominance of the dawn effect should come from the release of stored glycogen. However, if you don't have that insulin bump, or if that the glycogen effect, the glucagon effect, the hormone that releases the sugar and the hormone that is responsible for the conversion of protein and fat into sugar, particularly glycerol, into sugar, is ramped up. Now the dawn effect is not just a little bump for an hour or two in the morning. It becomes glycogen release followed by conversion of sugar, of protein, for example, to sugar, and you get a much more predominant rise in that effect, or a much more pronounced effect of sugar being released from the liver. Combination of glycogen breaking down to sugar, rapid release that can be excessive, and on top of that, gluconeogenesis. So what triggers that? Well, obviously, adrenaline, the fight and flight hormone. Adrenaline, as soon as you wake up, there's a little pulse of adrenaline. It's most in the morning, and you get that little adrenaline reflex that opens up the splanchnic bed. It shuts down the splanchnic bed, creates arterial flow to the liver, and releases a little bit of that sugar because the splanchnic bed is being shut down. So there's a deficiency, a slight drop in blood sugar, and the liver responds to that by that fight and flight. So it's not just an automatic trigger rise. There's actually a slight drop and then an elevation. People look at cortisol, the so-called stress hormone. It's not a stress hormone. There's a whole video on cortisol coming up. But cortisol does not play a role. Cortisol does not play a role in the dawn effect immediately, because cortisol takes a long time to be released, and cortisol takes a long time to work. 45, 50 minutes to begin to work, hours to really work. So cortisol is only an issue, and cortisol levels, diurnal variation, is usually higher in the morning. Cortisol levels are only a factor in a prolonged, deeper dawn effect. And cortisol is a normal hormone in the morning, but cortisol in excess may prolong the dawn effect and pronounce the dawn effect. It does not cause the dawn effect. And that's an important concept to understand. So if all these doctors are obsessed about cortisol and MTFHR dreams, and be very careful of some of those doctors that go down the road of cortisol. There's a whole video coming up on cortisol. It's not the hormone that causes that early dawn effect. If cortisol is part of this, it's because of a dysfunctional form of cortisol, not anything else. Glucagon gets released when that little blood sugar drop happens at the beginning. The glucagon gets released, and then glucagon should shut the insulin down. Insulin should shut the glucagon down. But if you're insulin resistant, that may not happen. So you get this big bump, much bigger bump and much more prolonged bump because of that unregulated glucagon effect. And the final one is growth hormone. And growth hormone, which gets released particularly in the latter parts of sleep and the early parts of the morning, which is your tissue repair, tissue healing hormone, requires glucose, and it also causes a bump in glucose. So all of those hormonal effects cause that dawn effect. But if the cortisol is heavy, if instead of growth hormone release, you're releasing something called somatostatin. Somatostatin blocks growth hormone and particularly blocks insulin. Now you're getting this excess amount of glucose going to the body, and that high level of sugar can prolong into the day. And when that prolonged dawn effect is happening, that can actually damage your tissues. So with my type 2s and my type 1s, I actually like them to treat the dawn effect, not because of the spike, but because of the duration. And the dawn effect should come down within half an hour to 2 hours of that early morning rush. And that phenomenon occurs in excess in my type 1s or my type 2s, but it occurs in everybody. So, is it something that you have to pay attention to? No, the dawn effect is completely normal. But the reason we get early morning blood work is because I want to see your blood system at its worst. And it's worst in the morning because of the dawn effect. So the dawn effect should still not have a blood sugar above about maybe in the 90s to 100s, ideally not even above 85 if you're insulin sensitive. And you should have minor amounts of ketones still available if you're insulin sensitive. With a big dawn effect, ketosis goes away. So it's not measurable. So looking at that early morning fasted blood work to capture the dawn effect is of great value to me as a clinician to predict how insulin sensitive or how insulin resistant you are. Now the question is, should you and how should you address the dawn effect? And there are a couple of logical ways that may not necessarily be that good. So, the most important strategy that I completely agree with is to capitalize on the growth hormone effect and diminish the somatostatin effect. And the best thing that you can do there, if possible, is to get a good night's restful sleep. And I know that's a huge challenge for people, but sleep is so important because growth hormone is such a useful molecule, such a useful hormone in the human body, and it's at its maximum in the early morning, right before you wake up and right after you wake up. So getting a good night's sleep is so important because not only does growth hormone promote that drop in sugar, it also promotes a drop in cortisol levels. So you don't start with higher cortisol levels. They should be flat when you wake up and then slowly rise up a little bit in the morning. Correcting insulin resistance is a general plan because when you're insulin resistant, the insulin that gets produced to drop that blood sugar doesn't work. And paradoxically, you're going to get a massive glucagon response. So it's a double hit. You're getting more sugar out of the liver than you want to get for the dawn phenomenon, and your insulin system's not clearing it. So becoming insulin sensitive also dampens the dawn effect. And this is one of the big treatment protocols with type 2 diabetes. That's why we tend to dose our first dose of insulin or our first dose of medication early in the morning to dampen that dawn effect. Now, the two strategies that may seem logical if we human beings were rats in cages. The first one is to eat dinner much earlier and then do something after dinner, go for a walk, do some exercise after dinner, is to burn off that stored sugar in the liver so that you don't have as much glycogen available. Well, the body doesn't quite work that way. So the whole concept of eating dinner early is bullshit, in my opinion, for two reasons. Number one, the human liver will always have enough, more than enough glycogen stored under normal physiologic conditions. Eating dinner early is not going to make a difference to that. The second thing is that most carbohydrate addicts and most people use eating and drinking between dinner and bedtime as a way to calm themselves down, as a endorphin releaser, as a relaxer. So if you have dinner too early and you are a victim of snacking after dinner, that makes the whole thing worse. In fact, I intentionally eat my dinner as late in the day as I can to reduce the need to eat crap between dinner and bedtime. So that's a fallacy in my opinion. And then the second phenomenon that people itinerary to talk about is to eat breakfast. Well, I will tell you categorically that's bad. The reason they say eating breakfast is because it triggers an insulin response, and the insulin response gets rid of the dawn effect, but the food that you've eaten goes into your bloodstream, has to also be processed, and makes things worse. So no. The longer you can go without eating in the morning during the day, the better, in my opinion. Now, if you want to eat breakfast, that's fine. But breakfast is the least important meal of the day, and you don't need that bump from food, especially if it's ketogenic food in the morning, to get that insulin bump to deal with the dawn effect. That is illogical thinking. And yet so many people tell you, oh, you must eat breakfast to combat the dawn effect. That's garbage. That's garbage. I would much rather you do something to calm yourself down, emotionally in the morning. And that doesn't mean just meditation. Meditation does calm you down, does bring your blood sugar down, because all those stress hormones, the adrenalines, everything else that are released early morning go down. But the other way you can do it is by doing some exercise in the morning and creating a demand for that sugar. So if you are physically active and at the same time doing some physical activity that actually gives you emotional restitution, that's a double positive hit. So for me, taking my dog for a walk in the morning that I do every morning, the physical activity utilizes a little bit of sugar, but the emotional restitution calms me down. And that's a double positive to reduce my dawn effect. So the dawn effect is a necessary physiologic response, but if it's a hyper response, you want to know that and treat it. And you treat it behaviorally, not by eating, but by doing. And you can then also, if you're diabetic, treat it with medication. But understand it, embrace it, use it, and understand that because of the dawn effect, we are most productive in the early morning. Leverage that, use it. Do your physical activity at that time. Use that sugar. Do some of your toughest work in the early morning. Think about that, folks. This is a normal phenomenon for all mammals. Don't be afraid of it. Don't get upset by it, but understand the metrics. And we can help you to figure that out. I hope this helps. I hope this shuts up some of the gum flapping on the internet. I am the Carb Addiction Doc. Till next time.